everyone, and thank you all for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started right on time to save as much time as possible for any questions. My name is Karishma Furtado, and I am so happy to be with you all this afternoon and sharing this opportunity with you all. I'm going to share more about the rest of the team and Sumi and so many other things along with my colleague Maggie here shortly, but first wanted to kick off with a little bit of light housekeeping. First of all, this event is being recorded, and we'll share that recording after we're done today. We'll post it online, so you can look out for that and share with your colleagues. Two, if you would like, you can hide captions and adjust settings related to those captions using the live transcript button that you should see on your end of things. If you want to know more about myself or Maggie, you can find our bios on the events page for this webinar at urban.org. Fourth, you've probably noticed that you are muted. There are a lot of us here, which is a wonderful thing. And just to keep that manageable, we're going to go ahead and keep the bulk of us muted, but we do, of course, want your questions and your comments. Those can be funneled into the Q&A box, and we will be monitoring those throughout our time and focusing our attention on them for the last portion of our time together. And finally, you are invited to engage with us online using the hashtag #live@urban. Continuing on, here is some of the good stuff that we will be covering today. I'm going to take us through some background on the Student Upward Mobility Initiative, followed by some explanation of key mobility concepts. Then my colleague Maggie will share more about the 2025 funding opportunity and application process before we get to your questions, which again, you are encouraged to add to the Q&A box along the way. But the bottom line of this is that this is a really exciting moment for us, and that we're glad that you're here with us in it. Our new RFP is live, and we anticipate awarding up to $3 million in total awards. We're going to talk about all of these details all of these pieces in greater detail, but bottom line, you need to submit a mandatory LOI by October 10th. A subset of you will then be invited to submit a full proposal, which will be due January 6th. And to help you determine whether you want to submit, we offer an option to share a one-paragraph pitch with us for quick feedback, and the deadline for that is September 19th. We expect to fund projects in the range of $50,000 to $500,000, with most falling under the $350,000 mark, with a 15% indirect rate cap and a project duration of up to 24 months. To share a little bit more about Sumi's motivation, education is often characterized as this springboard to lifelong success, but as so much evidence demonstrates, that link is broken for many students, including and especially those from backgrounds of economic disadvantage and other forms of marginalization. Strengthening that linkage between education and lifelong success requires knowing the answer to some fundamental questions, like what skills and competencies that schools can actually help grow and develop in students drive students' long-term success and mobility. We have sort of normative answers to that question. For example, students should be able to read and write and do some math. We also have lived perspectives of our own and of communities and employers, which agree in some, but not all ways. But in terms of what has been borne out by the evidence, our knowledge is thin, especially when we try to understand how the predictive strength of those skills and competencies compares to that of contextual factors, or even more complexly, how those contextual factors may shape the skills and competencies that we want students to develop. In the absence of this type of skills-focused, skills-based information, we tend to use, for example, in state accountability systems or college and career readiness indicator panels, measures of experience and credential, which are useful, but they're also incomplete and flawed. Sumi is motivated by the idea that if we had more skills-based measures of things that are proven to matter, Then system stakeholders, be they state education policymakers, governors, school district leaders, workforce development strategists, what have you, would be better able to intervene and build responsive education systems that promote long-term success for our students. And there are many efforts to reform and transform our education system underway right now, from high school redesign to competency-based education to career-connected learning, that would benefit, we think, from this skills-focused insight that Zumi aims to catalyze for the field. So our goal is to build an education to upward mobility research field so that schools, policymakers, and program designers can prioritize the skills and competencies that promote the upward mobility of students. And we actualize this goal in 4 ways. First, we work to identify the pre-K-12 skills and competencies that drive economic mobility. Second, we work to develop and improve measures of those mobility drivers. And these first 2 we do primarily through our funded research, through the great work of you and others. Third, we invest in data assets that catalyze new research, because part of why we don't already have answers to these education to upward mobility questions is because they are really challenging questions, right? They are these life course outcomes that are separated oftentimes from the experiences of K-12 education by decades. They're influenced by what's happening well beyond the K-12 education system. So to ask and answer these types of education to upward mobility questions in a thoughtful and nuanced way, we need longitudinal cross-sector data. That is not the easiest to come by. So soon we spend some time thinking and working in that space. And finally, we work to share what we're learning about these core questions of ours, the drivers of mobility, and how to act on the insights we are developing with our funded projects and others, to support the development of new insights, but also the implementation and activation around emerging insights. It's a team of us working on this. Here is the gang. You've heard me mention Maggie's name. She is the co-lead of Zumi with me. We benefit from tremendous support from our team, including Eden, our phenomenal project manager, Rachel, our data asset manager, Emily, our engagement coordinator, and Kristen, Todd, Reka, and David, providing all sorts of advisement throughout the project. We are also guided by our advisory council, who are leaders and luminaries in various corners of the education to upward mobility policy, practice, and research spaces. And we're very lucky to benefit from their input. Finally, we are grateful as well for the collective of funders that support Zumi, including the Walton Family Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Overdeck Family Foundation, and the Joyce Foundation, as well as our fiscal sponsor, Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. Okay, so to increase the odds of your success with our RFP, we wanted to share how we think about key mobility concepts that are really the bedrock of the RFP. First, we endorse a comprehensive definition of upward mobility. This means not only the economic success that we might most immediately think about, measured in terms of wages or income, but also power and autonomy, or the control people have over their lives, their ability to make choices and exert influence over policies and actions that they may feel affect their future. And third, dignity and belonging, those senses that come from contributing to family, to work, to community, and feeling valued for those contributions. This is a definition put forth by the Upward Mobility Framework that we think does a really nice job of encapsulating the full experience of upward mobility. We also like to underscore the mobility piece here. We are looking for improvement in one's well-being and one's status from childhood into adulthood, which implies a focus on those who start in a place of economic disadvantage. So we care a little bit less about helping those who are at the 75th percentile get to the 85th percentile in terms of the income distribution, and really focusing on those who are at the bottom end of that distribution to start. Second key concept we want to plant with you all. We focus on and prioritize skills and competencies over experiences and credentials. So, for example, demonstrated math skills and knowledge, as opposed to completion of a specific math course. And we know that the delineation between those two things, between experiences and credentials and skills and competencies, is not crisp, especially when we factor in the imprecise ways that we have of measuring things. And that fuzziness is part of the problem state that we aim to improve upon with Zumi, even if we do so imperfectly and incompletely. We think of those individual level skills and competencies as existing within 5 somewhat overlapping, not mutually exclusive categories of academic skills and knowledge, health and well-being skills and knowledge, career preparation, social capital, and cognitive, social, and emotional skills and competencies. Finally, we are very clear for ourselves and for our funded projects that we cannot aim to identify the skills and competencies that drive success in a vacuum from the messy context that students and all of us really face. We know that a student and their family could do lots of things right. They could study hard, they could take the right classes to develop the most useful skills, they could complete a quality internship, and still not experience the success that they aim for because of barriers that lie beyond them, not just random bad luck, but systematic patterns in how resources and opportunity are allocated, for example. We think that contextual factors can affect student success in school and beyond in at least 3 general ways. First, factors outside of school, like housing instability and food insecurity, can shape readiness to learn. Second, factors like funding can affect schools and school systems' ability to function well for all students. And 3, factors like bias in the hiring process or lack of good job opportunities in one's region can affect the degree to which students see a return on their success in school. And so we encourage ourselves in all of our projects that are considering applying for funding, to engage with this individual skills and competencies in context tension. And Maggie will talk more about that here shortly. The RFP says more about all of these key concepts. So you can turn to that document. We'll share the link again here in the chat. As well, you can find additional resources on the field resources page of our website, as well, and in our blog. And if you have any specific questions about them, or really anything else that I've covered up until this point, or anything else really, go ahead and drop those in the chat. I see those coming in. That is great. We will get to those, but for now, I'm going to hand the baton to Maggie for our next segment.
Thanks, Krishma. I really appreciate it. So as Krishma said, I am going to dive into our 2025 RFP. Keeping the concepts in mind that Krishma shared, our 2025 RFP focuses on the skills and competencies in late high school that propel students into academic mobility, and the ways in which skill development and access to opportunities in early high school and middle school shape those trajectories. We're really excited about this kind of focal area or focal time, which we heard a lot during our work with the National Governors Association over the last year as part of the Let's Get Ready campaign. We heard very clearly from state leaders that they need better measures to understand if students leaving high school are really ready for success. And we also think this will be really timely and useful to build the evidence base that can help orient the decisions of many active education policy and practice areas. such as high school redesign, career-connected learning, and competency-based education. We're particularly interested in applicants answering some big topics. These are questions like, what skills and competencies do high schoolers need to be on track for upward mobility? Which skills are necessary for all the mobility boosting pathways out of high school, and which are key for different paths, such as college, career, and the military? Which skills developed during middle school showed continued development in high school, and by what mechanisms? To what degree did development trajectories vary by student characteristics, and why? And how do school structures, such as options for different types of coursework, tutoring, other tracking and pathways, factor in? So we expect our grantees to work with these pretty large topic areas and to bring new ideas to us, both to develop measures and to validate existing mobility drivers. Projects can also propose a combination of both. So for measurement development projects, or you might hear us say track 1, we're interested in new and improved measures of skills and competencies. Here, we're primarily interested in measures that are in 3 of our buckets here: cognitive, social, and emotional, which you may know as durable skills if you're in the field. You may know them as social emotional skills or soft skills. We even previously called them non-cognitive skills. So they go by a lot of different names, but either way, we have a lot of resources on our website that outline exactly what we're talking about here. Beyond the cognitive, social, and emotional category, we're also interested in social capital measures and career preparedness measures. Again, really pushing you to think about the skills and competencies. And again, we provide some examples of this in the appendix to the RFP. For measure development, we're interested both in late high school and the middle to high school transition and early high school. We really want applicants to focus on how these measures can be scalable and usable in schools in the future. Some ways we envision this happening are by using existing technology assessment platforms or other existing data that's already collected in schools, maybe not all schools, but some schools, or that you can make the case that you believe those data will soon be collected in schools. The whole point is to help us understand how you think these measures can be scaled in the future without putting the burden on schools and teachers to do more assessment. Track 2 projects are identifying and validating mobility drivers. By this, we mean we want to really link measures of high school skills and competencies to adult mobility outcomes, as Krishma already outlined, and/or examine the relative weight of the contextual and structural factors that students experience, and explain how those outcomes are compared to or in addition to individual skills. So it's really the mix of importance in terms of defining students' long-term outcomes. So here we're thinking of either linked or longitudinal data that can be used to help us understand what's really driving equity mobility. For track 2, we're interested again in the cognitive, social, and emotional bucket of skills and competencies, social capital, as well as academic sub-skills, which could include knowledge. Here, we're more focused a bit more narrowly on late high school and really also encourage you to look at our current grantees projects that are on our website to get a flavor of what's already being done in the field. We know here that earlier skill development and trajectories matter, and clusters of skills, they don't all exist independently. So examining that may be features of proposed projects. We're also very interested in getting more causal estimates of how skills and competencies matter. And if there are ways to do this, we're very eager to hear about this. We'll give an example later on that might help articulate what we're thinking there. I'll now provide a couple of examples. By no means do these illustrate the only things we're looking for. We don't need 100 applications doing exactly this, but more we want to help you translate the concepts that Krishma shared and some of our RFP priorities into reality. So for example, in track 1, or the measurement development track, we could envision teams using AI to determine if students' question-taking patterns in one of the many adaptive educational technology platforms that your, my, and most of our students have access to can measure self-management as well as existing instruments. We'd be interested in this looking at different students. So thinking about students maybe who are in well-funded schools versus poorly funded schools, or students who have different levels of baseline knowledge. Some ways in which we'd see this in scope or push applicants to finesse it would be the fact that there's a clearly defined skill or competency. This is going to be really important for applicants. And it also matches some areas of interest, although, if folks have a case to make, we're open to it. We would push applicants to define how this is happening in the middle of the high school transition or high school. And we do see evidence that an applicant is already considering how context matters for these skills. And also can see some scalability based on the fact that they would be using existing technology platforms. We like that this self-management measure would be compared against existing validated instruments that may be happening outside of school or more on an ad hoc basis. And this would help us know if this scalable approach is really worthwhile. For a track 2 or driver validation example, one might look at the degree to which SAT or ACT detailed data, maybe subscore data, predicts adult success at age 30, and how that predictiveness compares to that of composite scores, where we already have some research already. We'd really want to understand how this might be different for all students versus students starting at or near poverty. And you can see from this example, we would push for really clearly outlined academic sub-skills. So not just saying we're going to do skills, but what do you think you're going to get out there? We also would love to hear how this project would be an improvement on what the field already has access to. And we would push an applicant to think about how are they defining economic mobility, as Krishna mentioned, both on the student side. So when they are a student, how are they defining kind of a baseline, and also how are they going to measure adult outcomes and show that that is economic mobility. We'd also be interested beyond some acknowledgement of the individuals and context. We'd be interested in hearing more about how maybe obvious things like test prep really matter in skill development here. A hybrid example, again, meaning there's part measure development and part driver validation, could be to develop a new measure of network mobilization skills, which is a skill-based form of social capital that could then be examined to look at the predictiveness of adult outcomes for students with different degrees of access to neighborhood and high school social capital, or maybe among students who are more or less civically engaged or engaged in extracurriculars. Beyond what you see on the screen as things we might think about as we reviewed an application, I would note that some of these categories, it's very easy to fall back into the idea of thinking about experiences and credentials. And we will really push applicants to think instead about skills. So again, here we'd be looking for something like the skill of network mobilization versus their access to social capital or other networks. So again, these examples are just meant to be illustrative, and we really encourage you to review the RFP on our website for all the details. Just a few reminders across all of these, and you hear me saying it maybe more than once because we know this will matter as we get ideas in. is we really want to focus again on the skills and competencies versus the credentials and experiences. We have blog write-ups about this. We have documents posted in the field resources, and we hope that'll share more what we mean. We also need applicants to consider how contextual factors are involved in any study. And by this, we don't just mean conceptually, but also in the methodology. If studies are focused on interventions or programs, which we could imagine, lots of great program evaluations, especially those that have more of a causal methodology, would really push you to think about getting beneath the black box and focus on the skills that those interventions are aiming to improve and how you can show us that you're measuring those. Across all these projects, we are really looking to push our own thinking and the thinking of the field with new and creative ideas. We also want to make sure these are scalable now or in the future. One way to think about this as you craft your proposal is at the end of your project, or maybe even partway through, how might a policymaker, intervention, or ed tech designer, school leader use your eventual findings? And why might these new measures or this new information about what drives economic mobility be more useful to them than what they already have? I also want to remind you that this is an upward mobility initiative. So we want to make sure you're thinking about students toward the lower end of the income distribution and how that changes for them over their life course. We also want you to define this, and we encourage you not to do any hand waving on that part. We, of course, again, have really resources about all of these concepts in our RFP and elsewhere on our website. Okay, so now for the administrative details, and I know my colleagues are monitoring the chat, but we'll get through some of this now and then pretty quickly move into questions. So as Krishma mentioned, the RFP is up on our website, it's open, and we will be accepting the proposals again for projects between $50,000 and $500,000 that can span up to 2 years or 24 months in duration. And that budget is inclusive of 15% indirect costs. This is a 2-stage application, and letters of intent are mandatory, while full proposals will be invited. Thinking about the timeline here. So last week we opened the new RFP. And before the LOIs are due, though, I will again note and highly encourage that we have a simple portal open to accept 1-paragraph pitches. And that's been open since we launched last week. We've already gotten some ideas in, and will continue to be open through September 19th. This is a really unique opportunity for you to send a clear paragraph to us and for us to provide you with some direction about how that aligns or doesn't align with this RFP. And we've heard from current grantees that doing this process during our first RFP really assisted them with drawing out aspects of a project that they might not have otherwise really emphasized in their application. So again, it's not mandatory, but it is highly suggested. And you all are smart people, but I will note, because we're often on the other side of this as researchers, the earlier you get an idea to us, the more time you will have with our feedback to be able to draft an LOI. And you can see on the timeline that LOIs are due October 10th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Applicants will hear from us just under a month later, around November 11th, whether they are invited for full proposals or not. And then full proposals will be due at 5 p.m. Eastern on January 6th. We anticipate making final decisions on the RFP in early February and having projects start in March. And if for any reason any of the timelines change, although we don't anticipate that, we'll update our website as well. So as we review the LOIs and RFPs, and even earlier in our thinking about the 1-paragraphs, we'll be keeping, kind of our principles in mind. So initiative alignment. This means that applications should be aligned with our initiative broadly, that track some priority areas within this RFP, and outline the key concepts we've asked you to focus on. Feasibility and rigor. We want these research and development projects to be successful, and we really want to hear how your data, team, plans, and strategies will ensure completion success. And now we don't need to hear about all of this in a one-paragraph pitch, but we will need to hear about this pretty early in the LOI process. We also want to make sure your methodologies will withstand the highest professional standards, and most, if not all, final proposals will go to external reviewers, so just please keep that in mind. Also note about feasibility that letters of support or data sharing agreements will be expected at the full proposal stage. Ingenuity. I mentioned earlier, we really want to advance the field by getting your best ideas about the novel research questions, innovative methods, measures, data, and technology, both right now and emerging technology, that can really move the needle about what we know about education to economic mobility. Actionability. As we mentioned earlier, we want to make sure this research can be scaled quickly and that we can build consensus around new measures. And finally, field building. We're really excited about proposals from this emerging cohort, as well as our current grantees in the field that really represent different perspectives and experiences. Okay, we're almost done here, and then we'll hear from your questions. So as far as next steps, I've mentioned we have a lot of resources on our website. Some things I didn't mention that are also on there are perspectives and information about how different community members who are parents, teachers, and advocates who really informed our initiative. You can hear more about that, especially the career preparedness part of our work. You can also see the FAQs, which my colleagues have mentioned in the chat. If you want to also sign up, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's more of a blog post than a newsletter, and that'll share emerging insights we have, as well as field leaders, both from practice and academia. We would love for you to apply if you think you have a great idea, and if not, please share this opportunity with your colleagues, or maybe even so. And we also want to make sure that we get the best pool possible and honor your time. So again, we encourage you to submit ideas by September 9th. If not, we look forward to LOIs. And this is a somewhat iterative process where we are hoping to get the best ideas, so we will provide feedback as much as is possible. And after this event, or toward the end, you'll get a link from one of my colleagues that'll help us improve future webinars, such as the one we have next week, by completing the survey. Okay, and with that, I believe we will turn to Q&A. So invite Krishma back on screen with me. And I'll ask Krishma for you to voice over the first question we're going to address and answer it if you can.
Sure. So first question up, past funding, and we're going to be bopping around a little bit, so don't worry if we haven't gotten to your question, which was asked earlier on. We will aim to get to them all. Past funding has focused on large-scale quantitative research related to upward mobility. Are there opportunities to support qualitative approaches to program development and evaluation as well? And I'm also going to highlight another related question that asks something similar for Track 2 projects and our interest in mixed methods approaches. The answer to both of those questions is fairly similar, and it is yes, we're very open to mixed methods projects or qualitative approaches and quantitative approaches that are appropriate for the question that's being asked. We have several examples of current grantees who are using qualitative approaches within their projects, especially in the measure development track, but not entirely only there. So examples of community advisory boards or interviewing to test out and develop a new measure. There are also examples of projects that are more quantitative in nature, and in the track 2 space, validating drivers, and folded in some interviews to really try to make some meaning of quantitative findings that they anticipated might be a little bit hard to interpret from just the basis of the numbers. So yes, to mixed methods, to qualitative approaches, assuming that they are appropriate for the question at hand. I also see, as part of the track 2 mixed methods question, are you open to research that focuses on a specific region, for example, a metro area? Yes, there are examples of that within our current grantees, and we invite that as well for the next cohort. A strong application will help us to understand what you learn about that particular region can or can't be generalized or transferred to other contexts. And if it's a project that's hyper-specific that really can't be transferred or generalized beyond that specific context, then that is something that we will take into account when considering those principles that Maggie shared. Maggie, let me pass things back to you.
Sounds great. We got a question wondering what our rationale is for including career preparation in track 1, measure development, and not track 2, the validating mobility drivers. We have incredible projects that are active and soon to have results going on in the field right now that are very similar to what you might look for in a track 2 career preparedness category. And so we feel like, maybe there's a project out there we still need to hear about, but most likely we won't be investing in projects like that right now, while we're still waiting to hear both what our current grantees found and then what gaps remain. Krishma?
Yeah. I'm seeing a question on whether we're imagining this as focused on U.S. domestic policy, or is there room to work internationally? We are open to projects that come from more of an international context, but again, we'll want to understand how what's being learned there applies to the U.S. context here. Back to you.
Got a project about when the latest a project can start. So we hope to be doing the paperwork for these grantees in February and March, and projects could start immediately. We also understand that, especially for folks in academic institutions, they may need to wait until a semester is over. So we'd want all projects to start by the summer at the latest. Partially to get the work going, because people are very eager for these answers, but maybe more importantly, part of this grant program is to have a cohort of grantees that learn and work together. And so we want to align projects as much as possible so that everyone gets the maximum utility out of that process. Krishma?
Yeah, I'm seeing a question about data collection approaches and whether online experiment or survey-based collection is supported. Yes, primary data collection, especially for track 1, measure development, is appropriate. Can also imagine it being appropriate in track 2, especially we have projects, for example, that have collected some novel data through various programs related to both school period experiences and mobility outcomes through various sort of career-connected learning programs, for example. It will be important when shaping those projects to consider the transferability piece again, and scalability piece. If this is a highly proprietary instrument that is only being deployed in a specific setting, and there are barriers to imagining it being implemented at a larger scale or in other settings, that would be a consideration. But perhaps there's something being learned sort of more secondarily about how tools like that can be used for measure development purposes that that are more scalable and implementable in broader contexts. But primary data collection is inbound and would also justify on the higher end of the acceptable award amount range.
Great. We got a question about who will review the applications. So the SUME team that you saw earlier on the screen, namely Krishma and I, will play a large role in the reviews. We will also have a large role for our research advisors, also listed on the slides there. We will also get input from our advisory council on the grant portfolio, and for full proposals, we anticipate having most, if not all, with additional external reviewers, similar to many grant programs. So we will manage that on our end. We do ask that as part of the LOI, we have space for you to list any known conflicts or other conflicts of interest with any of us, any of our advisors. That way we can arrange the reviewer teams in manners that are fair and consistent. So it does not preclude anyone who knows us or knows our advisors or has worked with any of us before from applying. It's more that we want to make sure everyone gets a fair review. And so we'll just ask you to acknowledge that, and we will do the same on our end. Krishma?
I muted myself. Is an organization eligible to apply if the proposed idea has only been piloted on a small scale, but requires funding to be fully developed and implemented at a national level? Yes, if there's a path, like a viable, feasible seeming walkable path to that larger scale of development and implementation, then it's appropriate to consider applying here, especially if we're talking about, let's say, a measure development project that is contributing to a space that is rather thin when it comes to existing measures, which we know is particularly true for some of the cognitive, social, and emotional skills that we conceptually know are important, but are hard to measure, especially in any sort of way we could easily think of implementing in a school context.
To add on to some questions that Krishna previously answered, there are some more questions about preferences for specific samples or populations. I think it depends really. We're really interested in understanding at a large level which skills and competencies in late high school, and then a little bit of a longer time span for the measure development, are driving economic mobility. So that requires thinking about who is furthest from economic mobility right now, or who's, which students are not becoming economically successful. And so there are ways in which focusing on specific populations makes sense. We also pair that with the idea that if a population or a question or a technology or a data source is so particular to a group of students that even if we have a great answer for it, it doesn't help us make meaning out of the whole set of projects, that we're not able to really extrapolate from it and help move the larger field forward or scale that measure or that solution, then we will struggle with it. So we ask you to kind of propose what you think is best, and there's not kind of strong restrictions on either side here. As Krishna mentioned, we have a range of state level projects as well as local or multiple site projects right now, and we could envision having the same for our next cohort.
Are we able to submit more than one paragraph summary ideas for feedback? Yes. If they are for distinct projects, then by all means. If you are submitting a first time and you get a response from us and you want to resubmit for additional layer of feedback, we probably will not be able to give you a second look, but if it's for a separate project, then yes.
These are great questions. Keep them coming, even if we don't get to all of them today. We will be updating our FAQs on our website pretty regularly. So hopefully, if you have a question, you'll get it answered either here or later. One question we have is for a track 1, a measure development project. Should they be thinking about connecting new measures to mobility outcomes? Or to predictors of those outcomes during the study timeframe? And the answer to that is no, you don't need to look at outcomes. These projects are about developing new or improved scalable measures. And so that there should be a theoretical link to economic mobility, or maybe an existing measure that's outside of school or in a different context that makes this feel really important to do to develop a new or improved scalable measure, but you do not have to connect them to outcomes. If you do want to connect them to outcomes, we ask that you list that as a hybrid project so we can better sort through those applications. Karishma?
Yes. Are projects expected to go through IRB? Yes, eventually, if they are human subjects research, they part of the grant agreement before signed will, well, we won't have to complete this before the grant agreement is signed, but the grant agreement will stipulate that any project that is human subjects containing will need to go through IRB approval or demonstrate an exempt conclusion from an IRB. That comes down the line. It's not something that you need to demonstrate at the LOI or full proposal stages.
We had another question, if we could define or share expectations for the principal investigator. So in terms of the application, we do not have requirements for the principal investigator. We will want every team to explain in your LOI about the feasibility of this project, why they're the best fit for the project, and then the principal investigator would become our main point of contact throughout the project. So thinking about scope, substantive updates, ensuring budget and timeline, but most importantly, that the project is carried out with success and that is useful, and also wants to participate in our network of grantees. We also hope to be able to offer, similar to what we do now, opportunities for multiple members of the team to interact with kind of a cohort of grantees. But getting back to the meat of the question, we do not have particular requirements for the PI.
If we have an idea but are exploring the data set, are we able to support that exploration? Teams should have their data plans pretty well locked down for the full proposal. They'll be asked in that proposal to describe the data access plan. And so we'll want to see demonstration that you have track to a path to, if not already a completed and signed data use agreement or LOI or some sort of agreement that ensures that is well underway and in the works, because we know how long those paths can take to navigate from sort of start to finish, and we don't want to you to waste your valuable time figuring that stuff out on the clock, so to speak, of the project. So we expect projects to be able to show that they have access to the data they plan on using by the time that they're ready to submit the full proposal, but that can remain a little bit squishier for the purposes of the LOI. And a related question, are institutional letters of support from partners required for the LOI or RFP stages? There is an option to include letters of support from partners in the LOI stage, and to the extent that that helps signal, viability of the project and the partnerships required for it, that's helpful to see. But we generally are expecting more of that to be available for the full proposal stage. So if that isn't sorted out at the beginning, that is okay.
We got a question about the final deliverables of the grant. So all the requirements for the grant are toward the end of the RFP. So we encourage you to look at those. But specifically by the end of the grant, we will have expected you to publish your findings in a working paper or policy-oriented publication, regardless of what they show, and also have been an active participant in our both public and more private convenings before that. Now, with that said, we really, really encourage you to think about how you can weave deliverables in throughout your project. One of the funnest things for Krishma and myself is being able to get previews of grantee findings. And one of the hardest things is, making sure that teams are ready to get those published before we start shouting them from the rooftops. So we encourage you in your applications to think about when you might have draft results or a one-pager or things that might be useful, and also who the audiences for those might be. That's not to say that everyone has experience doing like practitioner-oriented one-pagers or implementation docs, although many of you surely do. So, stay in your lane as much as makes sense, but interim deliverables and ways to share findings before the end of the project are really prized by us.
A couple questions about PIs. Is one able to be a PI on multiple proposals? Yes, as long as they're distinct proposals. I will say, like, in wanting to help catalyze and fund a robust field of researchers out there, I have a hard time imagining that we would fund two projects from the same PI. But it's not just allowed to submit and see which if maybe is the better fit, and especially if the teams on each are slightly different. Similar, then related to that, is it normal to only have one PI on the team? Not at all. I would say most of our projects right now have multiple, a co-PI structure. For the purposes of the LOI and full proposals, you will be asked to designate the PI, which is basically the corresponding principal and investigator. But if you want to use an alternate structure that invites more folks into that leadership position, that is fine. You'll be wanting to demonstrate how the team that you assemble is the team that makes sense for the project that you are proposing. And on the other hand, we have projects as well that do use more of the sole PI approach, which is also fine. Same caveats apply about demonstrating how that team is the right team.
One project question we got is would the project need to apply to all career paths, or can the project be specific to one field, such as healthcare? So this is a really, really good question to help us zoom out and think about what we mean by economic mobility. So if we think about a student starting at or near poverty, and then the skills that are really driving economic mobility. So you might be measuring that by thinking about their wages, their debt, their participation in social safety net programs, their health insurance, their voting, lots of different ways you could think about the adult outcomes. We also need to think about what jobs they have access to, things like labor market discrimination, what are the contextual factors about the school they attend, et cetera. So I say all of that zooming out to then zoom back in. So if a project was thinking about career preparedness, we'd want to think about what are the skills that drive economic mobility and for whom, and then how much do we think that will matter for lots of different students. So maybe I could envision, I don't want to make up an example on the fly because surely I'd bumble that, but maybe I could envision a project that does that is specific to healthcare career paths, and the team could provide reasons as to why that's, a path to economic mobility, maybe why that will or won't be changing in the age of AI. But most importantly, it should be what are the skills or competencies driving the economic mobility and how would you measure it, rather than just saying they got a job in a certain industry. Krishma?
Yeah, is it possible or preferable to join with university researchers on this project? It's possible and it might be preferable. It depends. It's acceptable is what I will say. We have some examples of projects right now that involve a community-based organization that has been deep in the weeds of embedding within a school and delivering some sort of programming, and they applied with their research and evaluation partner who is situated within a regional university. So that is a model that has worked well for at least some projects and could be appropriate for the project that you have in mind as well.
And with that, I think we're going to have to start wrapping up. We really, really appreciate these amazing questions that help you and us understand what we need to better define. As a reminder, we hope you will check our website, check out the RFP that's on it, as well as all the resources, fill out the survey to help improve future webinars. And we hope that we see your LOIs and maybe even before that as part of the one paragraph pitch. One note is that if you sign up for our email list, we will be sending out an announcement when the LOI live is actually up on our website, but it will be there in short order, as well as a preview of what the LOI will look like. So you can look forward to that. So thanks for all your questions. If you have more, you can direct those to SUMI, which is SUMI urban.org, and we will filter through those and answer directly, as well as try to get those up on our FAQs. Thanks so much for joining.